just so we can notify you of any future events or any more information. So if you'd like to pass that around.
Yeah, I've got another one here then. So
oh, you've got another one?
This is the local.
Okay. So
right.
Do you want to pass that around?
Yeah, I haven't got a pen here.
There's a pen. I'll pass it around. Name and email address if you want. The other thing is, this is a free event, but the price of the hall has to be covered. So I'd like to pass around a couple of tins if you've got any change. You don't have to, but if you can help us, that'd be great to cover the cost of the hall. We all give our time free, and all our research is done for free, but we just want to cover the cost of the hall. So I'll pass one round that way, one round that way.
That's okay. We don't mind that, do we, John?
One other thing I didn't mention, but something that's going to be covered by Matt a bit later on, is about chembusters as organoid. I think some of you might be familiar with it already. Max is going to cover that a bit later. I've got a few bits of organoid here. If you want to buy them, take one and put a donation in the tin, that'll be good. Okay, Max is going to be on later, but first of all, we've got Ben Dodds. Thank you. Cheers everyone.
Oh, attention. It's alright when John sits straight.
Excuse me.
It's alright now.
So
It's my presentation called Geo-Engineering with a Blue. And the reason I called it that is because the majority of days when I leave my house now, the sky isn't blue. It's silver, it's white, and that's the result of the trails. That's what I've been noticing. So basically it's November 2011 when I left my house and I noticed irregular trails like parallel, like a grid pattern. And from there I've been filming ever since. I basically make little videos with information in to try and make it accessible to people to understand the topic, to understand the concerns. So yeah, climate engineering in the 21st century, that's the subtitle. Because I believe more so than the chemtrail conspiracy theory, what we're witnessing is a bit more sciencey than the actual sort of death dumps and whatnot. Yeah, we'll get into that. So, rest in peace, the chemtrail conspiracy theory, 1996 to 2009. So yeah, everyone here is obviously aware of the trails, that's why you're here. Some people are fence sitters, you've seen them but you don't know what's going on. But what will happen is you'll type in chemtrails, because that's what you refer to them as, and you'll find the chemtrail conspiracy theory on Wikipedia. What you realise is complete disinformation, it's a complete pantomime. So what happens is when people say Google chemtrails for a beginner, they'll Google chemtrails and it'll put them off. So I'm trying to step away from the chemtrails and move it more back into like the weather modification side of it. The reason I put 1996 is because that's roughly the first time the word chemtrail was used, and it was an American military advisor in a particular paper, and he classed it as an exotic weapon. So whether that be spraying or changing the weather or something, but using it for warfare, that's what the initial purpose is. And the reason I put it ending in 2009 is because that's when in the UK we've officially researched and regulated something called Geo-Engineering. And Geo-Engineering is the science of helping combat global warming, but using these weapons that have been developed over the last 50, 60 years. So yeah, I want to sort of step away from chemtrails and take it to a bit more realistic. So here we have a front cover of a magazine in 1956 in America called Collier's Magazine. It's weather made to order. So Navy Captain H.D. Orville wrote a book on it. It was the President's advisor, and yeah, man's progress in weather control. So here's a little excerpt from that. So after the experiments at General Electric's research laboratory, there was a feeling that humanity might finally be able to control one of the greatest variables of life on Earth. And as Cold War tensions heightened, weather control was seen by the United States as a potential weapon that could be even more devastating than nuclear warfare. And I think that was mentioned earlier when we just saw the HARP video. So back in the 50s and 60s, when they were first looking into this, they'd just obviously created the atomic bomb, which just cracked the atom, which was the most devastating and powerful weapon that they ever had. So they were thinking, if they can control and harness, say, like a hurricane, you've got the power of an atomic bomb there, but without having to split an atom and destroy everything, you've got like a natural one. So that's where their ideas were taking them, is to sort of control the weather for warfare. And obviously, Cold War tensions. So Russia were putting just as much effort into this as the Yanks. So the Yanks were sort of coming out saying, we need to do this to protect ourselves, because if Russia get ahead of the game, we'll be flat on arms. So, okay, yeah, so we're going to go through like a little bit of history. Right, we'll go through about 40 years of history quite quickly. But this is a picture from 1952 in Lynmouth, 16th of August. And this is a famous story called the RAF Rainmakers. I don't know if anyone's heard of this at all. It was published in the Guardian newspaper. But basically after the 50-year Secrecy Act, it turns out in 1952, the RAF were testing with cloud rainmaking. So back then it was silver iodine. You could put silver, spray it in the air. It's what they use for crop dusting now, for cloud seeding now for crops. But they were stress testing, as they do. So they put as much in as possible to see what outcome they had. And they actually killed 32 people. Obviously at the time, no one had a clue it was anything to do with the RAF. It was until 50 years later, through the Secrecy Act, they released the information.
Where was this?
Lynmouth, so Devon or Cornwall. Yeah, so like 32 people. That's, I would class it.
Killed how?
There was a massive flash flood through the village, and actually we've had quite a few recently. I've forgotten what the village is called in Devon, but you must have seen it about a decade ago where we had these massive flash floods. But this one was caused by the RAF. So the RAF rainmakers, and like I say, it wasn't until 50 years afterwards that they released the information, so we don't know about it. And as well, when they do release this information, because it's 50 years after the fact, a lot of the people are already dead, it's the next generation, no one really gives a toss anymore. And so this is a year later, a Donald Duck cartoon, and it's Donald Duck the Rainmaker. So a year after the UK had just tested with our rainmaking, I believe it's an American cartoon, but they're even, just this picture still here, they're like saying he wants exactly 2 inches. So they're sort of bragging about how specific they can be about cloud seeding making it rain, and he's saying, oh, it's the bargain of the week, we can do S-shaped fields, and so basically it's a brag in a cartoon. And I think there's a cartoon from 1981, a Smurfs cartoon, which is all about HARP, basically the science Smurf builds a weather control machine. I did it in a previous presentation where I broke it down, but it's very telling. It is
Prepare the kids, basically.
Yeah, and they're hiding the ideas in the stories. Okay, you can't actually see that, but that says Norwich 1962, zinc cadmium testing. So chemtrails, so planes spraying out radioactive particles all over Norwich during 1962. They did it on 3 occasions. So I haven't got it on here, but there's a BBC documentary that you can watch, a Horizon documentary about it. It's on YouTube. Just type in Norwich Chemtrails and it will come up. And what that was released, I believe, early 2000, and that was to counteract that this information had come out. So this information wasn't released through the Secrecy Act. This was because one man asked the right questions through a Freedom of Information Act. And he asked several questions in the end, and they had to release the information. And now we have extensive testing throughout the UK that they released up until the 1970s, and it doesn't just involve zinc cadmium. They were spraying bacteria, E. coli down in Devon. They've tested all over us, because as someone pointed out earlier, that it's illegal to use it on the enemy, but if you're testing it, you can test it on your own people without any comebacks.
So they broke that with Agent Orange, didn't they?
So people can't sue. Sorry.
So they broke that with Agent Orange, didn't they?
Well, yeah, that's another one. Yeah, so they sued the hell out of them, didn't they? You got literally 50,000.
I thought it contravenes Nuremberg laws to test on your own population.
Well, it doesn't if it's in the realm of testing. It doesn't really make sense, but if it's testing, it's not official. So once you test something and make it official, then say if something goes wrong, someone can sue. But when it's still in the realm of testing, it's all up in the air legally. It's hard, and hard to prove. That was the main thing with the zinc cadmium testing. So, I mean...
They also, can I just say, they released it from vans as well.
They did, yeah. So there's loads of different, like dispersal methods and that. And another thing they did as well, which is a telling sign on how it's compartmentalised, is like the doctors were retaining all this information. So they were asked to, specifically if people had cancers or whatnot, or any ailments, so they would mark that all down, but they didn't realise it was because this was all being done. And again, so... here is a map of what's called the cancer clusters of Norwich. So these are, I forgot, what's the local newspaper called?
Daily Press.
So it was all in that literally about 7 or 8 years ago, and you can, if you just, again, type in cancer clusters of Norwich in Google, and it brings up a whole page on it, and the timeline of events. And this is still growing, it's still growing, and still nothing has come from it. So you've got so many families now that they want an answer. Why was this done? Like, why did you do it? And not even compensation, but just some kind of reply or an apology. And still to this day, they deny that spraying radioactive particles on us would have actually had any ill health effects. And again, because it's too tenuous to prove that the radioactive particles are what's caused all these cancers, it's too hard to prove. So again, it's in legal terms, you haven't got much recourse. But I mean, that's quite shocking if you think about it. So
Are you saying this is where they sprayed it?
yes, I'm from Norwich, but whereabouts are we on here? Earlham, is that sort of around here? Is it? Oh yeah, there it is.
My cousin was living in Suffolk Square area, which is more central where there's no dock. And when she moved to West Cottage,
and that's one of the main ones. So it wasn't irregular cancers, they're getting sort of throat cancers and respiratory.
Esophagus cancer.
Another telling sign, I don't know if you've all seen these adverts recently about if you've got a cough longer than 4 weeks, go see your doctor. And that reeks again of the same sort of practices they were doing here. You go to your doctor and basically they're collecting the data on what's up with people's lungs.
Well, he gives you a vaccine, the doctor.
Sorry.
Yeah.
12 jabs. But as well, so, I mean, from what we're witnessing now, I'd say it's slightly different. So this is chemtrails, as much as chemtrails get, dropping radioactive particles straight from the Earth for that desired purpose. But it just shows you that they will test anything. Like, this is the most extreme. Testing is what it's made about. Okay, so now we're going to fast forward to 1974. And this is from a good friend of mine, if anyone's on Facebook, join a group called Electrosprayed Worldwide. And there's an American fellow called Pete Raymond, and he's basically scoured all of the databases from NASA, DARPA, and found so much information in regards to weather control that we didn't even realise existed. So this is 1974, this is his local paper, Spokane County, I believe. But he said that this report actually came up in several local newspapers at the time, but none of them were connected. But yeah, 1974. Just got a little bit here saying how. In 1972, New York Times pinpointed what apparently was the first American use of weather modification as a weapon. In 1963, when the Denny regime in South Vietnam was besieged by a series of Buddhist demonstrations, CIA observers noted that demonstrators usually scattered when rain fell, even though they disregarded police tear gas. Yeah, so the rain would put them off. So again, the Americans would think, oh, let's rain them out. So anyway, because of that, weather weapons were then banned. So I believe it was 1976 that because of exactly what the Americans were doing in Vietnam, which was making it rain, it flushed out supply trails, everything like that, made it difficult for them to fight back. Because of that, the UN banned weather weapons as a weapon, because it makes sense, doesn't it? So, and that's what I'm going to sort of try and shift on. That's what I think is happening. Geoengineering actually gets round the ban on weather weapons because it's needed because of global warming, which is the trick, I think.
And that page is called
Electrosprayed Worldwide. Which is, electrospray is a type of chemtrail, so there's technology out there where you can electrically charge the contrails coming out. So they're basically like, they've got an electric charge in them, and then you can affect them with ARP or other technologies. But this was the main bit I wanted to point out on this, which is the biggest bit in it, is the supercomputer bit. So, it goes on there. As a result of the success, the Pentagon began its largest and potentially most important weather program, Project Blue Nile. So Project Blue Nile ran for about 3 years, and then that turned into it says here, during the House Appropriation Committee hearings in 1972, Director of Defence Department, Department Advanced Research Projects Agency said Nile Blue was needed, since it now appears likely that major world powers have the ability to create modification of climate that might be seriously detrimental to the security of the country. So it's 1974. So at the heart of the project is a supercomputer called Liliac-4. So if you imagine in the 70s, computers obviously after, was it IBM that were using computers to log the catalogue the Jews? That was one of the first times that they used supercomputers of that kind. So what they used here is, Liliac-4, and they collected all kinds of data, whether it be from buoys or testing centres, everything, to make a model of our climate, of our atmosphere. So, you know, like when we watch The Day After Tomorrow, that film, and it's like they do climate modelling. So it all came from here. So basically you use a massive bloody computer to take in all the information, and then you've got the climate, you've got the atmosphere on your computer, and you can chuck scenarios in it, you can chuck in a hurricane, you can program it all in on the computer. So that's where we were then. So, and that's, again, this will make sense for when people say pilots switching on and off. all of it is monitored by supercomputers, if that's the case. If we're talking in the 70s they were doing that, I mean, how much more advanced it is now. And there's another little bit here, just to point it out. The use of computer simulations had three distinct advantages. Data could be fed in quickly and assimilated. Simulation cut down on the use of personal material and then made field tests more effective. Several scenarios could be tested simultaneously, so they could do anything they want with these models. So if they ever wanted to affect the weather, they could do it on a computer first just to see what happens. Okay, this picture here is a test. It was Project Visions. This happened this year or just the year before, and I'm sure a lot of people here would have heard. I'm just about to play a clip, and it's Doug Rowland from NASA, and he's the head of Visions. And what they did is they fired up several rockets up into the atmosphere and released lithium from them. And obviously lithium is a metal, it's obviously used in batteries, it's toxic, but it has many different properties. Also it's a power source, which is the main one. So what they were doing here is testing not in the troposphere, stratosphere, which is where we tend to see our trails. This is right up in the magnetosphere, I'm not too sure, but the highest range. So they're basically releasing this crap to see how it blocks out the sun. They've admitted it, how it blocks out the sun and what interactions they can do and how they can affect it and how it can affect clouds down here on Earth. So Project Visions. But the reason I've got this is because there's a very telling interview. There's a lady rings up this Doug Rowland because when she heard that lithium had been released, she freaked out because she thought, oh, it's poisonous, it's lithium. So he's actually talking to her about trying to make her feel better that the lithium isn't going to damage her. But he lets out a couple of little nuggets into what the trails can be used for. So let me just play with you a bit.
Done in the 1970s, it's been done recently in the 1990s and 2000s.
Oh, that's not...
Sorry, it's just saying there, lithium has been released from rockets before in the 1960s and the 1970s and now. But
what it said on this article here.
It hasn't been done since 1970, the lithium release in the daytime.
Why would it be done now then, sir? That's scary.
Detailed information, if you could please send your comments by email.
Okay, will you respond to my email if I send them?
Happy to answer them, yes.
You will. Okay, what was your email, sir?
Douglas.e.Rowland, D-O-U-G-L-A-S.
Douglas. I'm sorry?
E.
Rowland,
R-O-W-L-A-N-D.
At,
NASA.gov.
I'm sorry?
NASA.gov. NASA.gov.
Okay. Well, I will be expecting an email back from you then, sir. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's very important. We communicate what we're doing to the public. We're very interested in making sure everyone knows what we're doing. We're not, we're a civilian space agency dedicated to science and research and so on. So we're very keen to make sure that the taxpayers know what we're doing and everything. So. Well,
you know, when the article came out in the major newspapers, including the Huffington Post, there was no mention of lithium. Not one. Not one mention of lithium until I heard the recording.